Dennis is, that's much better. Dennis is blessed with a daughter, son-in-law. That's good. Much better.
Page 2. Shelo yigamer leolam hachol v'hayam rishrush shel hamayim berak hashamayim tfilat Adam Hachol V'Hayam Rishrush Shel Hamayim V'Rak Hashamayim Tfilat Adam. O Lord my God, I pray that these things never end. The sand and the sea, the rush of the waters, the crash of the heavens, the sand and the sea, the rush of the waters, the crash of the heavens, the prayer of the heart. May it be that in this land, in North America, and in the land of Israel, where the majority of living Jews reside, that there be a deep connection to our shared history and a deep commitment to learning from that history as we enter Yom HaShoah. A moment of silence before we light the 6 candles. I'll offer a meditation. I invite you to close your eyes. Today we let silence speak. We remember the 6 million whose names we must continue to speak, though their songs were silenced, whose lives were taken. We remember the children whose laughter was lost, the elders whose wisdom was buried, whose communities burned, whose Torah scrolls turned to ash, whose homes were emptied, whose hearts were broken. Now I'd like to invite 6 members of our community to come forward to light 6 yahrzeit candles. each one representing 1 million souls whose lives were cut short, but whose memory we ignite with light tonight and honor. Anyone who feels called to come forward, please do. Perhaps Ari will light on behalf of the children, since you're still under 18.
Well, today is the 23rd of April, and today, 80 years ago, was her liberation day from the camps, April 23rd. So on behalf of her and the 6 million.
Bernie, would you like to share? Or later?
The stars that's shown here.
Oh, you know what? Bernie, I'm sorry, there's Zoom, so come forward if you don't mind, so that the people on Zoom can hear you. And Pat, I'm sorry, I didn't. Just come to the mic. Only when you do speak, if you don't mind.
The star that's displayed here was the star worn by my mother, who was in Paris at the time of the Nazi invasion, and during when the deportations began. I don't know if people knew about the velodrome. She and her 9 siblings fled to all parts of France and lived with Catholic families. And she lived with a family, a woman named Madame Vaux, who was childless, and she and her brother posed as her niece and nephew, and that's how they survived.
Definitely didn't prepare anything. This is a mindedness in memory of my father, who was a Holocaust survivor, and he made it to where was it, David? In France, to a boat that it's a long story, but he finally made it to Ellis Island on 1941, and here I am.
More full of life than ever before. Diana. I'm grateful for the lives that are here, who are children of survivors whose stories are so gratefully told tonight. And I hope we'll give a lot of space for anyone to speak with any stories, even if you're not officially our speaker.
So I have no none of my family was involved in the Holocaust. But I have made 3 trips to Auschwitz-Birkenau, 2 of them with a group of Germans. And we spent 4 days in the camps, each time meditating. I carry a picture. In one of the rooms, it was a photographic, all the pictures that were recovered from the people who were murdered. There was a picture of a little boy. And it struck me because I was born in 1940. My mother was Polish. I was born in 1940. And this little boy was about 3 years old. And I have a picture of myself when I was 3 years old. And there was a remarkable similarity between this little boy and me. So I carry his picture. And I want to add also that I will be in Germany on June 15th this year in Cologne with a group of Germans who are the people I traveled to the camps with, but who are looking at the rise of anti-Semitism and what's happened. It's the dark shadow of Germany today is what the theme of this conference is. And okay, thank you.
There's one more candle.
Just want to say as we light these candles that Yom Hashoah has been commemorated since the inception of this synagogue. And I can picture the people, and I want to acknowledge their memory, some still living, I believe, who got up and either lit candles or spoke their story. Somebody like Henry Hoffman, who could not really speak his story because it was too difficult for him to speak about it in public. And Peter Voulgus, who would play a violin, speaking to us as only somebody, I think, from Vienna or wherever country, from Hungary, only could admit those kinds of feelings. And so the room is filled with memories, ghosts,
And somebody said something to me today, if I have a moment, just and I'll stop. I felt guilty today because it was a gorgeous day. 4 years ago, I had planted 4 flowering trees in a little place in my garden. All 4 are in flower right now, weeping cherry, kind of 3 other trees, another cherry, red bud, and I'm there, and the weather was perfect, and I had a few minor ailment a few days ago, which went away, so I was exuberant. And then I realized it's our celebration of our commemoration of this day, and I felt guilty. So I actually called somebody about it because I was unprepared for having forgotten what this day means in this community. And person said something interesting. He said, I'm sure the souls of those people would be happy to see a fellow Jew celebrating the beauty and grandeur of this world. So it it touched me in a way that spoke to that side of whatever story we can say about this day.
Okay. Mm. To build a synagogue is to affirm life, Jewish life and life here in this corner of our world. So thank you. Ari, would you like to offer a reading from our packet? We are on page 3 of our packet, the butterfly.
The very last, so richly, brightly, dazzlingly yellow. Perhaps if the sun's tears would sing against a white stone, such a yellow is carried lightly way up high. It went away, I'm sure, because it wished to kiss the world goodbye. For 7 weeks I've lived in here, penned up inside this ghetto, but I have found my people here. The dandelions call to me, and the white chestnut candles in the court. Only I never saw another butterfly. That butterfly was the last one. Butterflies don't live in here, in the ghetto.
The butterfly was written by Pavel Friedman was it written at Theresienstadt concentration camp? Because he refers to the ghetto, but on June 4th, 1942, on September 29th, 1944, he was deported to Auschwitz, where he was murdered. Every year I go into the basement of my in-laws' country house several times a year to reclaim some of the books that have been stored there since we moved back from Colorado in 2016. So in our 9th year, and there's still hundreds of books. I always bring back bags and boxes. And this past month, just a few weeks ago, I was up there for the beginning of Pesach, Chol Hamoed Pesach. And I went down, and it's always rushed because, you know, you're living your life. Like, how much time do you have to go down and see your old life and your old books? Most of the time we visit them, and then, of course, we take some. But there was one book this time that I saw differently than I had ever seen it. It was The Survivor's Haggadah. And when I had seen that book, and it's been living in the basement, I didn't see it as important enough to bring to my stacks of Haggadot to use at a Seder. And I brought it back, and I realized that history is repeating itself, and I need this book in a different way than I needed it then. And I see this day differently than in my lifetime I've ever seen this day. I want to invite our speaker to come forward. Dennis, thank you for joining us. Pat, thank you for inviting Dennis and for organizing this evening's ceremony. Dennis Schoen was raised in Washington Heights, pursued higher education in the Bronx, and obtained a master's in social work from Hunter College. His clinical experiences prompted Dennis to explore the psychodynamics within his own family, including between Holocaust survivors and their children. He will tell the story of his father. Dennis is blessed with a daughter, son-in-law, and 4 granddaughters, whom he loves dearly. His eldest granddaughter, Rafi, will present his father's story at tomorrow's Yom Hashoah commemoration at her school.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dennis.
Hello, everybody. Good evening. My name is Dennis Leo Schoen. I would like to thank Rabbi Shosh, Rabbi Ben, and my good friend Pat Gaston for inviting me today to honor my dad and present his story. Many of the experiences in my dad's life bring me to tears as I try to understand the horrors he witnessed. How does one survive losing your entire family and forced out from the place you lived in for over 25 years? How do you start over in a new country and adapt to a new culture? But Dad did survive and thankfully lived a long life. My dad, Richard Schoen, was born on July 28, 1914, in a town called Grossikatz, located in the northern part of Austria. He remembers seeing his father for the first time when he was 2.5 years old, as his father fought in the Austrian army during World War I. Grossikatz was a town of approximately 14,000 people, with only 3 Jewish families. The rest of my dad's family moved to Vienna before my dad was born. My dad's family continued to live in this town despite some anti-Semitism because my grandfather inherited his home and the family business. They hoped to be able to assimilate with the non-Jewish population. In fact, my dad felt the family was well respected. Dad's parents, Anna and Theodore, owned a tannery business located in their house selling leather products. My grandfather was a religious man who prayed at home 3 times a day, since the nearest synagogue was over 10 miles away. Years later, Dad would tell me how proud he felt of my daughter, Leah, who attended yeshiva, and would often say that his father, Theodore, would be so happy and proud of Leah. Clearly, he was connecting the past with the present and the future. He would be surprised to learn that Leah is now a principal of the yeshiva. Dad was the second oldest of 3 children. Leopold, or as he called him, Poldy, my uncle, was the oldest child. Dad's sister, Irma, my aunt, was 9 years younger than Dad. Dad admired Poldy, his older brother, who in effect became his first role model. Poldy attended college and taught Dad how to play chess, a hobby Dad actively continued his whole life. It's interesting that my uncle was named Leopold, as Leopold I in 1658 banished the Jews from Vienna. Perhaps this was an attempt to assimilate with the non-Jewish population, a yearning to belong. If any of you saw Leopoldstadt on Broadway, that was clearly illustrated. And my middle name is Leo. Dad recalls the anti-Semitism in this town and the many names and insults hurled at him. Dad recalls being called a swine Jew. Of course, this was in German. And responding, "If I am the Jew, you are the swine." As I listened to his show or interview, Dad's common refrain in a difficult or painful situation would be that he always tried to do the best he could. What did he learn about dealing with hostility and aggression? And how was that conveyed to my brother and I? At age 9, Dad was sent to live with another couple in a town 65 miles northwest of Vienna to pursue his Jewish education. His father sent him to this town because there were more Jewish families and less hostility. The man with whom he lived and studied was a cantor. Although there was insufficient food, Dad tried to do the best he could. Even though he was homesick, he only visited his parents 3 times a year. I wonder how Dad had coped without his parents for 4 years. This early separation may have prepared Dad for what was to come. At age 13, he had his bar mitzvah in the town where he was studying. His family and friends joined him, where he made a speech thanking his parents and the cantor for everything he had learned. Dad appreciated what others did for him, a quality that helped him adapt to difficult situations. He always expressed gratitude to others, which endeared him to many people. After Dad's bar mitzvah, he moved to Vienna, where he studied textiles. When Dad was 18 in 1932, he returned to his family home to work in the tannery business with his father. I assume his father had plans to turn over the business to Dad when he retired. Sadly, this plan was sabotaged by the Nazis. In 1933, only 1 year later, Hitler assumed power in Germany. On March 13, 1938, Germany annexed Austria, an event called the Anschluss. A month later, the family received a letter from the Gestapo ordering them to leave their home and business within 3 days and move to Vienna. Frightened and scared, Dad packed family pictures, books, his chessboard, prayer books, a yarmulke, and a few other personal possessions to take with him to Vienna. The family found a 1-bedroom apartment for all 5 people. They received no compensation for their home or business. I can never imagine the terror they felt, fearful of what tomorrow would bring. Worried about the future, Dad's parents sent his younger sister Irma, now 15, to Mannheim, Germany, to live with relatives where they hoped she would be safe. I have no idea why they thought Germany would be safer than Vienna. That's something that I never asked my dad. Several months later, November 10th, 1938, Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass. The Nazis in Germany and Austria desecrated 1,400 synagogues, vandalized 7,500 Jewish businesses, and arrested 30,000 Jewish men, 90 of whom were murdered. Dad witnessed Jewish people forced to scrub sidewalks, synagogues torched, Jewish storefronts smashed, and Jews rounded up and taken away. Realizing the Nazis would soon come to their apartment, Dad and his brother fabricated a scheme to protect their parents, sending them to bed to pretend they were ill. When the Nazis arrested Dad, who was 24 years old, and his brother Poldy, the Nazis spared my grandparents, but only for the time being. Dad and his brother were first taken to a local police station, but because of crowded conditions, they were moved to a larger holding area. After standing for hours and frightened of what would happen to them, Dad's brother shouted, "Why do we Jews have to suffer? What did we do wrong?" Their crime, of course, was that they were Jewish. The guards quickly grabbed Poldy and removed him. Dad felt paralyzed, fearing if he protested, he too would be removed. That was the last time Dad saw Poldy. Dad never stopped agonizing about that fateful moment and felt guilty for remaining silent, torturing himself for the rest of his life. Several weeks later, Dad's parents received a letter from the Nazis informing them Poldy was killed attempting to escape, which of course was a lie. Dad interpreted his brother's actions as having lost his nerves. But did he? Wasn't he courageous to protest their inhumane and unjust situation? Would that interpretation have alleviated any of my dad's lifelong guilt? I don't know. I feel Poldy stood up out of strength to resist their arrest. The next day, the Nazis moved Dad to the railroad station and forced him and others to stand in boxcars, pressed like sardines. They were forced to stare at a light bulb in the middle of the wagon. For entertainment, the Nazis forced Jewish men to fight each other. Dad was terrified and began banging his head against the side of the car. Fortunately, other prisoners came to his aid and comforted him. After many hours, they arrived at Dachau, a concentration camp the Nazis used to imprison Jews and political prisoners near Munich, Germany. The Nazis screamed, "Heraus, heraus, mach schnell," meaning out, out, quickly. Dad, weakened from not eating and standing for hours, stumbled out. Many were too frail and collapsed. The Jews were herded to a large field where they were again forced to stand for hours in the bitter November cold. Dad feared what was going to happen next, but he tried to be strong. Eventually, those that were still standing were taken to the barracks. As the photographer was about to take a picture of Dad, the next day, as part of the registration process, the Nazis took pictures of all the prisoners. As the photographer was about to take a picture of Dad, a Nazi stabbed him with a needle from behind, causing Dad to jump out of his seat and contort his face. Dad thought this was an attempt by the Nazis to show the world the Jews looked like criminals. I believe it was to show the world the Jews were insane, as the Germans continued their propaganda to dehumanize the Jews. The Jews received prison uniforms which were inadequate for the freezing temperatures. Many people suffered from frostbite. Fortunately, Dad did not. Dad was woken up every day at 6:30 and marched to a field and forced to dig trenches, break up stones, and push wheelbarrows full of sand from one end of the camp to another. Guards watched from a tower while other guards on the ground beat any Jew who stopped to rest. Many people did not survive. This went on for weeks and months. After several weeks, the Germans allowed Dad to write to his parents to let them know he was alive, well, and that he loved them. After 2 months, an order from the Gestapo granted the release of those prisoners who could produce a visa stating that they would leave the country within 3 months. Dad contacted his parents, who were able to obtain a visa for him to emigrate to Shanghai, China. Unfortunately, while Dad was taking a shower, he was assaulted by Nazis and fell onto a pipe, causing bruises on his arm. Consequently, the Nazis did not release Dad until his wounds were healed, which took another 4 weeks, fearing propaganda would surface about the inhumane conditions and treatment in the camps. After his wounds healed, Dad was released and returned to Vienna to be with his parents. He was happy to be home, but traumatized by the murder of his brother and his 4-month ordeal in Dachau. Preferring to emigrate to Israel via England, Dad applied for visas to various Jewish committees. After sharing his brother's fate with the committee, he was approved to go to England. Dad had hoped by going to England rather than China, he would be closer to Austria, enabling him to rescue his family. Prior to leaving Vienna, he traveled to Mannheim, Germany to say goodbye to his dear younger sister, who he always referred to as an angel. He promised her he would do whatever it took to help and pray that they would see each other again. 3 months later, in May 1939, at the age of 25, he said his goodbyes to his parents and boarded a train to England via Belgium. Although he hoped he would see his parents again, he never did. As there were Nazis throughout the train, Dad was fearful they would arrest him again. He dared not look at any Nazi directly. When he arrived in Belgium, he breathed deeply, feeling he was finally free. But even in America, years later, Dad would always look away when a policeman walked by. Once in England, Dad immediately dedicated himself to helping his sister escape from Nazi-controlled countries. He consulted with various Jewish committees, but it was a challenge because she was only 15. His only recourse was to find her a job as a domestic worker in a home. Although he was successful in finding her a job and even obtained the necessary papers, war broke out, ending all hopes to rescue his sister. Dad felt demoralized, realizing he failed to honor his promise to save his angel. Consequently, Dad suffered guilt his whole life. Still, he hoped the situation would improve and he would see his family again. The Jewish committee sent Dad and other Jews to a hostel in South Wales called Hashoah, a kibbutz-like farm. He recognized some of the people from Dachau, and they formed friendships that lasted their entire lives. When Hitler invaded France in 1940, the British government, fearful that Austrians and Germans were spies, interned Dad to a facility on the Isle of Man. After 3 months, he applied for essential war work and began working for the Forestry Commission and later in an engineering company. By 1942, Dad worked in London for a company that built aircraft parts until the war ended. My mom, also from Austria, had fortunately arrived in England by kinder transport, an organized rescue effort in which the United Kingdom took in nearly 10,000 predominantly Jewish children before the war started from Germany, Czechoslovakia, and Poland. My parents met each other at the same engineering company when their work schedule overlapped for one day. They connected quickly after realizing they were both Jewish and from Austria. Coincidentally, my mom and Dad's sister were born the same year, both 9 years younger than Dad. My parents were married in England in November 1944. After the war, Dad was notified his parents were arrested in Vienna, taken to Theresienstadt, a concentration camp in Czechoslovakia, and finally to Auschwitz, where they perished. Dad's sister was arrested and taken to Minsk, where she too perished. He was devastated. By the end of the war, Dad started to create a new family, but never recovered from the guilt and horror that happened to him. Tormented his whole life, he suffered, questioning why he alone was the only member of the family to survive. In 1948, my parents moved to New York to be near my mom's family, who survived the war. I was born in 1948, and my brother Ron was born in 1953. Despite his limited income, he ensured we always had enough food and clothing. He deprived himself of any pleasure or material goods, but was happy to spend money on his family. Most importantly, he ensured we had the opportunity to attend college, so we would not have to struggle as hard as he did. It was only during his retirement that he permitted himself the pleasure of spending money to travel abroad and winter in warm climates. Loss, guilt, fear of aggression, and punishment were predominant themes growing up. My dad did not talk about the Holocaust, his experiences in the concentration camp, or his grief over losing his family until I was an adult. My mom shared limited information with us, discouraging us from asking Dad questions. I only knew his family was killed and his brother was shot on Kristallnacht. As a child, my daily experiences of trying to be an American boy felt far removed from Dad's life, and I certainly did not want to bring up his past and cause him more pain. As a child, having no concept of time, I felt his horrific experience happened long ago in the past. It's only as an adult could I realize his losses occurred so close to when I was born. I found it strange that Dad loved to watch boxing on Friday evenings. It was so unlike my dad to enjoy this violent sport, but I came to understand years later this was his way of venting anger and rage. I remember Dad spitting at the TV when either Germany or Hitler was mentioned. In spite of Dad's horrific life, he was a loving parent with a warm smile and a sense of humor. He taught us how to play Austrian board games, chess, and to ride a bike. I remember fondly taking long bike rides with my dad in Upper Manhattan. Growing up, however, I also wanted an American dad like the other kids on the block, a John Wayne type who knew how to play American sports and drive a car. I wanted a dad who could be tough and who could help me fight my battles on the streets with neighborhood bullies. My dad was fearful of taking risks and scared of authority figures. It was only after I became an adult did I realize how strong and tough Dad was. He survived a war, living with unbearable guilt and grief, and survived cancer. He also showed his strength and devotion to Mom, finding a comprehensive retirement center later in their lives, as he was concerned he would die first, and he did not want Mom to feel abandoned, as his sister must have felt. As a social worker, I heard case discussions about the negative effects of the Holocaust on families. It resonated with me. I read Viktor Frankl's book, In Search of Meaning, which had a dramatic effect on me. I realized I was also profoundly affected by the Holocaust. I too experienced anxiety and depression. My brother and I had an unspoken but critical role in my family, replacing our lost relatives. I was named after Dad's brother, and my brother was named after Dad's father. In 1980, I heard about a Holocaust survivor gathering in Washington, D.C., and asked my parents to attend. Dad was now 66 and recently retired. It had been 42 years since his traumatic experiences at Dachau. Surprisingly, Dad agreed to attend, so the four of us went to Washington. I remember the dramatic effect the gathering had on Dad, who instantly felt relieved at seeing other survivors, some even wearing striped prison pajamas. He started to feel less alone with his private shame and guilt. He talked to other people who shared horrific stories of survival and guilt. He wore a sign on his chest with the names of the concentration camps his family members were sent to, hoping to find somebody who could give him some information about his family. And I have a picture of that here, of my father wearing that sign. He slowly began to discuss his past, agreeing to talk to students and giving interviews to children who wanted to know more about the Holocaust, culminating in an interview with the Hashoah Project, so his story would be known forever. He talked about how happy he was living in America and how proud he was to have good and successful children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. His life had meaning, for he survived to generate another Jewish family. In 2003, when Dad was 89, my wife and I traveled to Europe, and while in Vienna, visited Dad's brother's gravesite. Dad had paid for the stone, but did not have a chance to see it. I called Dad from the gravesite, and together we recited Kaddish, the prayer for the departed. This enabled Dad to bring honor and dignity to his brother's memory, as Dad felt terrible that none of his relatives had a proper funeral. At 90, Dad fell and broke his hip. During Dad's stay at the hospital, he became delusional and believed he was in a concentration camp. He responded violently when I tried to wake him up, screaming at me in German, believing I was a Nazi who was torturing him. Thankfully, he recovered quickly from this emotional episode, but the demons were still there. Later at the rehab facility, he developed a severe and virulent infection. He was close to death and resembled a concentration camp survivor, having lost a lot of weight. He talked about giving up, but I reminded him if he survived Dachau, he could certainly survive this infection. I was not ready to lose him. At 99, we celebrated his birthday with a party for many of his friends and relatives. 4 generations of Schoens came to celebrate. Although he was now blind and frail, he felt our warmth and love. He cried with joy, literally, for several days. He conveyed how grateful he was to his family for helping him survive so long, always appreciating what people had done for him. He died several months later. Dad was so much bigger and tougher than my juvenile view of an American John Wayne. I am both very proud of my dad and in awe of his incredible capacity and strength to survive in the face of horrific conditions and devastating losses. Overcoming tremendous hardships, Dad created a meaningful life in a new country, never giving up on his religion, humanity, and warmth. I believe in inner strength, feeling grateful and expressing gratitude to others enabled him to survive for so long. I am so proud to be his son. I am a living connection to the history and lessons of the Holocaust. Now that I've shared my story with you, you are a living connection to this history and lessons of the Holocaust too. Thank you.
May his memory forever bless you with may his memory bless you and your beloved family, your brother who's here, and your granddaughters, with the knowledge that his courage and strength and power to love again and to live again has inspired all of us tonight.
Thank you.
Dennis is open to any questions or comments that you might have. Pat. I have a microphone.
Dennis.
Thank you.
Thank you. Part of our class and learning to sort of share, organize these stories that we did together. What was your dad's research to find the burial of his brother, the burial place of his brother? Or do you know?
My understanding is that his parents were notified of his death and that they were told that he was buried in the central cemetery. They didn't know exactly where. Later, I had a relative, one of my dad's cousins, who went to the cemetery and found the plot, and with my dad's funding, put a stone up there. That's my understanding. And as I said, about 18, 20 years ago, my wife and I visited. Last year, my brother and I visited that stone. And we just both broke down, knowing what happened. Yes, 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 yes. But my dad never forgave himself for not doing anything on that day. And there's a picture somewhere that my brother or I have, which says, please forgive me, Paul D. I didn't know what to do. It's very, very heartfelt. I can't imagine what that would have looked like. His brother's, taken out of the area and shot. It's incomprehensible. Ron, nobody hears you, so you want to come up and say it?
We're working on a mic that will travel through, but if you could speak into
I
the
think when my father passed, we found the piece of paper that said, "Forgive me, Poldy. My heart wanted to come up and help you, but my brain stopped me." Just that. No, it was written in English, and it's just that it
Breaks you.
breaks your heart.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions?
And doing what you have done to share it with all of us and to the next generation. And what I have, my question is, what brought you to the point of wanting to know your father's story? I experienced the same thing. And I always tell people, why don't you interview your parents and get their stories? Because you preserve their story, but how many stories have been lost or can be still found if people take an interest in doing what you did?
It's a good question. My father died in 2014, September 2013, actually. And 3 months later, well, not even, I went to Auschwitz. And I was devastated in Auschwitz. I was just crying the whole time. And I kept on thinking, my dad was never in Auschwitz, he was in Dachau, but how did dad survive a concentration camp? I wanted to know. I wanted to understand that. Up till that point, I was too frightened to watch his Shoah interview. I was too frightened to watch it. I never did. This opportunity came, I heard about it as a lark. A friend of mine told me, who lives in Westchester, they're doing a program at the Terrytown Y, the JCC, writing your parents' story. I said, oh, I want to do it. It was almost like an impulse. I needed to do it. And so that's how it started. And I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful that I was able to write this story and to honor my dad in this way and to share it with you. I'm just sorry that he wasn't around for me to ask him more questions and for him to hear his story. But he shared his story with on the shower in the shower interview, although it was very, very painful to watch the interview. I mean, he was really suffering. He was 90 at the time, but he was trying so hard to remember the facts, every fact. He wanted it to get it right. But yeah, it was a combination of things that got me to, just a chance of having this program and hearing about it and having been to Auschwitz and wanting to know more about what happened.
You told the story so powerfully. I don't know how many of you have heard it told to you as a story with those details, like we're there, in a very long time. So I really appreciate the effort you've clearly put into practicing the telling of your father's story. And I know he, in some way, is here.
I'm sure. I'm sure. Thank you so much. It's been a privilege to share my father's story with you.
Please rise for El Male Rachamim on page 6. El male rachamim shochen bamromim Dayan almanot v'avi v'tomim Hamse menucha nechona al kanfei hashchina B'ma'alot kedoshim u'toharim Kezohar haraki amirim umazhirim L'nishmot Sheshet hamilyonim achinu v'achyoteinu Anashim, Nashim v'tov Shanihergu, Shanishchatu, Shanisrafu, Shanichneku, Shanikberu Chaim. V'shahalchu le'olamam al kiddush Hashem. Ba'avor she'anu mitpalalim le'ilui nishmotehem. Lachen ba'al harachamim Yastirim beseter knafav le'olamim Bitzror hachayim et nishmotehem Began Eden tehe menuchatam Adonai hunachalatam V'yanuchu v'shalom hamishkvotam v'nomar Amen. Source of all mercy, dwelling in the heights, find a perfect resting place beneath the wings of the Shekhinah for the souls of the holy and pure ones who shine like the radiance of the heavens, for the souls of the victims of the Holocaust, in recognition of the acts of righteousness done in their memory. Therefore, may the compassionate one shelter them beneath the wings of the Shekhinah for all time, and may their souls be bound in the bond of everlasting life. Also for the souls of those who have survived, and who have since left this world, with gratitude for the lives they were blessed to live after. The eternal is their inheritance, and may they rest in peace upon their resting places. And let us say, Amen. Mourner's Kaddish is on the page next to this one on page 5. If you'd like to say names, please do so now. Say you're done. Or you can say the name of your father. Thank you. Oh, I'm so sorry. I was just saying to say his name, and we'll all say it together. I'm sorry to miscommunicate. Anyone else? May their memories forever be for a blessing as we hold somehow all of their names. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah Be'alma divra chirute v'amlich malchute b'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chaye dechol beit Yisrael ba'agala uv'izman kariv v'imru. Amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevarach le'olam ul'almei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh V'yitadar, v'yitala, v'yitalal, shemei dekudsha, brichu, le'ela, min kol birchata, v'shirata, tushbechata, v'nechemata, Da'amiran ba'alma v'imru. Amen. Yehi shlomo rabba min shemaya. V'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom bimromav. Hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom bimromav. Hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru. Amen. We remain standing because we need to take a stand. The quote on page 4, attributed to Martin Niemöller, a German Lutheran pastor and theologian. Initially a supporter of Adolf Hitler, he eventually became an outspoken critic of the Nazi regime. He was arrested in 1937 for his opposition to the Nazis' state control of churches and was eventually sent to a concentration camp. After World War II, he became an advocate for peace, reconciliation, and justice. We say together at the top of page 4, first, they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. Please be seated. In the counting of the Omer, the journey of 7 weeks in which we purify our souls that have been redeemed again from Mitzrayim, from our narrow places, into again freedom. We know, of course, none of us are free until all of us taste true freedom. And so we count every day. And this week, when we observe Yom HaShoah, it is the week of Gevurah, of strength, and of healthy boundaries, of self-care in that way. Today is Netzach Shebegevurah, endurance within strength. Tonight, as it is the day not only of Yom HaShoah, but of Gevurah, of strength and heroism, we call on the strength of our ancestors as we face again moments that test our humanity, policies that draw hard boundaries without compassion, voices that call for exclusion and cast peoples as threats. It's tempting to look away or to be silent. To remember the Shoah is to remember what happens when we let dehumanization go unchecked. To remember is also to resist the erosion of empathy, to taste the maror every day that we turn on our computers and we look again at the horrors and we taste again the maror of our own bitterness, and we allow our hearts to stretch and to break, even as we consume with our minds. Perhaps the same amount of time we are reading and processing, we should spend sitting, maybe have a jar of maror nearby to taste and to maintain our heart's ability to feel. May the memories of those we honor tonight be for a blessing, and may we be their legacy, strong, enduring, and brave. And let us say, Amen. We'll leave in silence.